Hello, and welcome back to 250 Years of Freedom. I hope you all had a good Thanksgiving. This is episode 16, 1805 to 1806. Lengthen thy cords. Since leaving the Mandan villages in April, a mysterious quietness followed the Corps of Discovery. The distant horizon was rising with imposing mountains, and for the last several months, no Indians nor horses were seen. If the expedition was to succeed, they would need to barter for horses with the Shoshone. Thomas Jefferson's words to the expedition rang in Meriwether Lewis's ears: "Find the portage across the Rockies to the Pacific." His dream of a coast-to-coast United States rested now upon the 36 members of the expedition. Challenges were mounting: the Great Falls, the Rockies, the lack of horses, and forks in the river. A wrong choice would bring major setbacks or even death. As the Corps of Discovery was embarking on their push toward the Rockies, the Barbary Wars had begun a 500-mile land assault on Tripoli. Under William Eaton's lead, a detachment of U.S. Marines led by First Lieutenant Presley O'Bannon, along with 500 Greek and Arab mercenaries, marched from Alexandria, Egypt, westward. On April 27, they attacked the city of Derna. This was the easternmost city of Tripoli, and sacking the city would pressure the ruling Pasha to end the attacks on American ships. When a letter was sent to Governor Mustafa Bey requesting safe passage by Derna, he responded, "My head or yours." With a battle now inevitable, a bombardment of cannon fire from the USS Argus, Nautilus, and Hornet pummeled Derna's forts from the Mediterranean Sea. Ground forces attacked the walled city from the east and the west. After an hour-long naval assault, a victory ensued, marking the first time an American flag was raised on foreign soil. Immortalization of the battle lives in the Marine Corps hymn with the words, "To the shores of Tripoli," which I think I have a Christmas tree ornament here for the Marine Corps, and on the back, there's the Marine Corps hymn. "From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we will fight our country's battles in the air, on land, and sea." This victory pressed Pasha Yusuf Karamanli to agree to a treaty of peace with America. The USS Philadelphia's crew were still being held captive in Tripoli since their mighty ship was run aground on a reef and captured in 1803. With a final payment of $60,000, Pasha Karamanli agreed to release the 297 American captives back to the United States, and the war was over. American shipping could resume without fear in the Mediterranean, and the world took notice of the young nation's effective military. In the meantime, the western lands of the American continent were a vast, untamed, uncharted wilderness, with several world powers still holding claim over it. Spain was particularly offended by Jefferson's Corps of Discovery and what they believed was a direct infringement to Spanish lands in the Oregon Territory. The American spy, General James Wilkinson, advised Spain of the expedition as contingents were dispatched to intercept Meriwether Lewis's band. Through several attempts, dispatching between 50 to 600 troops, Spain was never able to catch the expedition. In total, 1,174 Spanish and militia were sent after the Americans. Spain had issues of its own, as desertions, Indian clashes, and other problems plagued their pursuits. Lewis and Clark were facing their own traumas, as the men logged over 50 harrowing encounters with grizzly bears. Sacagawea had given birth to her first child, a son she named Jean-Baptiste in February, whom the whole expedition loved and nicknamed Pompey. A fond interest was taken in the young boy, whom Clark would offer education and upbringing. In August, facing a choice in direction, Sacagawea, or Sacagawea, recognized Beaverhead Rock near a three-river split at the Missouri headwaters, indicating they were near Shoshone land. The location was where she had been taken captive at 12 years old by the Hidatsa tribe and enslaved. She was taken as wife of a Canadian trapper named Toussaint Charbonneau as a teen. Not long after, following months without sight of any tribes or horses, they finally encountered a band of Shoshone Indians. As it happened, it was the Shoshone chief, Kameawait with some scouts. In an incredible stroke of luck, Sacagawea recognized him as her brother. The reunion was a fortunate one. Dozens of horses were provided to the expedition, and Kameawait went with Lewis and Clark to Lemhi Pass to show them the way west. As they broke over the ridge, Lewis's heart sunk. There was no continuous river route connecting to the Columbia. The Rockies were not like the Appalachian Mountains as Jefferson had expected. Instead, they looked out over one towering mountain range after another. On September 1st, with their needs met, the Corps bid farewell to the Shoshones, and the arduous crossing of the Bitterroot Mountains began. Charts of the most unknown region on the continent were made, while at the same time facing hunger, cold, and exhaustion. Horses had to be consumed for nourishment. A month and a half later, the party finally reached the Columbia River in October near present-day Pasco. In the midst of fall, bogged down by typical northwest rain, the expedition was held up for 5 days in a place Lewis named Dismal Niche. Once progress was resumed, Clark, in his eagerness, exclaimed on November the 7th, "Ocean in view! Oh, the joy!" But they were yet 20 miles from the Pacific, tricked by the wide mouth of the Columbia. By November 15, they had finally reached the Pacific Ocean, establishing a winter encampment at Fort Clatsop near today's Astoria. The weary group settled in for a soaking wet winter on the coast, bartering with the Chinook Indians for goods and building a fort in 2 weeks' time. Meanwhile, in the States, it was assumed that the Corps of Discovery were dead. No word or news of their journey had been received, and there was little hope of seeing them again. The Spanish had been 2 steps behind before losing the Americans to the Rockies, eventually giving up their pursuit. On the Pacific, the expedition was rested and prepared for the return trip by March 23rd. They had to wait until June before crossing the Bitterroots until the snow melted. There, the expedition split into 2 groups, Lewis going north along the Marias River, and Clark going south along the Yellowstone. The return trip took only 6 months, as the triumphant Corps of Discovery reunited and, having covered 3,500 miles, arrived back in St. Louis on September 23, 1806. Home at last, William Clark wrote in his journal, as the expedition fired off 3 shots to announce their return. People gathered on the shore and shouted and cheered the arrival. Later that day, Captain Lewis wrote to President Jefferson, "It is with pleasure that I announce to you the safe arrival of myself and party. In obedience to your orders, we have penetrated the continent of North America to the Pacific Ocean and sufficiently explored the interior of the country to affirm with confidence that we have discovered the most practicable route which does exist across the continent by means of the navigable branches of the Missouri and Columbia rivers." The President expressed great relief at their return, writing in response, "I received with unspeakable joy your letter, announcing the return of yourself, Captain Clark, and your party in good health to St. Louis." Jefferson had earlier written, "The acquisition of this territory is a blessing of heaven itself." It would seem that God's hand of providence protected the gift and guided the small, brave Corps of Discovery, who endured countless dangers. In his December the 2nd State of the Union address, Jefferson commended the explorers, saying they have by this arduous service deserved well of their country. The specimens and artifacts, along with maps, were placed on display at Monticello, Virginia, at Jefferson's Indian Hall, showcasing the expedition's results. The borders and influence of America were expanding. A nation found on liberty was being given room to grow. Land with purpose, not to dominate, but to steward. As Psalm 24:1 says, "The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein." Westward expansion would test America's character. Great blessings brought great responsibility. Even Jefferson admitted, "I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just." This echoed God's words to Israel, "Beware that thou forget not the Lord thy God," Deuteronomy 8:11. God sometimes opens doors, not so that we may boast, but so we may build. As Isaiah 54:2 says, "Enlarge the place of thy tent, stretch forth the curtains of thine habitations, spare not, lengthen thy cords, and strengthen thy stakes." America lengthened its cords, Israel built its stakes, and through it all God guided both. May we cherish the land, serve its people, and honor the one who gives purpose to every horizon. Amen and amen. That'll do it, and we'll see you in 1807.